The anime opens with a breathtaking scene of a fierce battle where we see a young man, Yoshiharu Sagara, sprinting through the chaos of war. Suddenly, a man named Kinoshita, who had previously saved Yoshiharu's life, takes a bullet to the chest. In his last moments, Kinoshita urges Yoshiharu to pursue his dream of building a magnificent palace, bringing together all of Japan, and living among many women. Kinoshita's last words echoed in Yoshiharu Sagara's mind as he tried to make sense of his surroundings. He was lost in a haze of confusion, still reeling from the shock of being suddenly transported to another world while playing a game about Japan's warring clans. But his thoughts were interrupted when a girl on horseback appeared before him. She was being pursued by soldiers, and a fierce battle ensued. Despite her impressive sword skills, the girl was at a disadvantage when her weapons slipped from her grasp. Sensing danger, Sagara rushed to protect her. With his phone battery running low, he played war music featuring the voices of soldiers to intimidate the attackers. But when his phone died, Sagara had no choice but to fight with his own two hands. As the dust settled and the soldiers retreated, Sagara was astonished to learn that the girl he had just saved was none other than Oda Nobunaga herself. But there was a problem. In history and in the game he played, Oda Nobunaga was male. Now, she stood before him as a yellow-haired teenage girl. The confusion only grew as they traveled together back to her village, accompanied by her beautiful and well-endowed subordinate, Shibata Katsu. Sagara couldn't believe his eyes. Nobunaga wasted no time in putting Sagara on trial to determine his fate within her clan. After all, he had saved her life, and she owed him a debt of gratitude. When the trial was over, Sagara became Nobunaga's newest subordinate, taking the place of his predecessor, Kinoshita. But what really caught Nobunaga's attention was Sagara's phone. She thought it was a magical tool and was amazed by its capabilities. Sagara explained that he was from the future, but Nobunaga refused to believe him and even gave him the nickname Monkey. To make matters worse, Sagara had to face Niwa Nagahide, Nobunaga's tactician, who was skeptical of his abilities. Sagara was escorted by a skilled soldier named Maeda Toshi to visit the house of Ojo, a warm and welcoming host who planned to introduce his daughter to Sagara. Excited at the prospect of meeting a beautiful woman, Sagara was disappointed when he discovered that Ojo's daughter, Nene, was just a child. Meanwhile, Toshi sensed an intruder in the house and thrust her spear into the ceiling, revealing a smoke bomb and causing Sagara to disappear. In a surprising turn of events, Sagara was abducted by a female ninja named Hachisuka Gaiman, who declared herself his subordinate. Sagara was bewildered by this sudden turn of events, but as he reflected on his situation, he realized that he had been transported into the Sengoku era of the video game he was playing. Determined to fulfill Kinoshita's dream and complete the game's storyline in this era, Sagara tried to make sense of his new reality. On another front, Sagara and Nobunaga were ambushed by warriors who belonged to Yoshimoto Imagawa, a clan leader similar to Nobunaga. Despite being preoccupied with playing soccer, Imagawa was displeased when she learned of her failed attack on Nobunaga. Atori Hanzo, her ninja, informed her of a mysterious young man who had suddenly appeared on the battlefield, revealing Sagara's presence. Meanwhile, in the region of Mino, another clan leader, Saito Dosan, watched his son practice sword fighting. Despite his desire to attack Nobunaga, Dosan was uncertain about his chances of winning a battle against her. The next day, Nobunaga gathered with her subordinates to discuss her plan to seize the Mori territory. Sagara, who claimed to have come from the future, was determined to prove the truth of his words. To this end, he made a guess that Nobunaga would meet with Dosan at a temple, which surprisingly turned out to be correct. Dosan had sent a letter to negotiate, prompting Nobunaga and her subordinates, including Sagara, to head to the designated location. However, Sagara was uneasy, knowing from history that Dosan might pose a threat to Nobunaga's safety. His suspicion proved true when Dosan's subordinate, Akechi Jubei, had arranged for a firing squad to be stationed on a nearby hill. Upon witnessing Dosan's intentions to ambush Nobunaga, Sagara suggested that she should also mobilize a firing squad from her troops. Fortunately, this strategy worked, and Dosan abandoned his plan to attack Nobunaga. However, Nobunaga did not show up at the negotiation venue, leaving Sagara puzzled. But to his surprise, Nobunaga arrived later, looking stunning in her new attire. The negotiations eventually led to an agreement between Nobunaga and Dosan, with Sagara showing interest in Jubei despite being regarded as an enemy. During the negotiations, Nobunaga invited Dosan to work together to bring positive change to Japan. In return, she promised to fulfill all of his requests. Nobunaga was determined to avoid a civil war in Dosan's territory, as she believed it would be a pointless and harmful endeavor. Dosan believed that Nobunaga had underestimated him, and reminded her that he had his own troops. However, he failed to recognize that his troops were not as powerful as Nobunaga's and were only skilled at long-range combat. Sagara, who had been held back by Katsu, was finally given the opportunity to express his opinion. He reiterated that he came from the future and advised Dosan to hand over the Mino region to Nobunaga. Sagara explained that Dosan's troops would be futile in a fight against Nobunaga's superior forces. Eventually, Dosan agreed to hand over Mino's territory to Nobuna, and it was merged with her own. Sagara was thrilled to hear that Dosan was famous in his era and believed that he truly was from the future. Nobuna was relieved that she didn't have to fight for the Mino region, but Dosan's son opposed the unification. Despite this, Nobuna and Sagara continued to bicker over trivial matters, even though they both believed that Sagara was indeed a time traveler. The next morning, Sagara was having breakfast with Toshi and Nene. However, Sagara was dissatisfied with his side dish of leaves and protested, but Toshi told him to take the fence if he wanted to add something to his meal. Eventually, Sagara was forced to eat the leaves, but to his surprise, they were delicious. As they continued eating, Toshi mentioned that to eat good food, one must have a high rank. Sagara assumed that Katsu had a good body because of her high rank. As he was talking about it, Katsu arrived to invite Sagara somewhere. Toshi followed them, thinking that they were going on a date, but Katsu denied it. However, Toshi believed that Katsu was teasing Sagara by flaunting her ample cleavage, and Sagara denied any romantic interest. Soon after, Sagara, the protagonist of the story, was teased by a little girl who turned out to be Oda Nobusumi, the younger sister of the powerful leader Nobuna. Nobusumi seemed to dislike her elder sister, and even insulted her in front of Sagara. However, Sagara didn't approve of Nobusumi's behavior and tried to advise her not to be presumptuous towards her own sister. But his efforts were thwarted by Katsu, Nobusumi's advisor, who was forced to obey her despite disliking her attitude. To make matters worse, Nobusumi also planned to seize her sister's power, and Sagara and Katsu decided to inform Nobuna about the rebellion plan. Sagara then tried to mediate between the two sisters, stressing that their conflict would only endanger both of them. However, Nobuna refused his offer, and instead gave him a mission. Nobuna then revealed that the region controlled by her sister, Nobusumi, was a free trade area where rice was abundant. She tasked Sagara with using 3,000 gold pieces to buy as much rice as possible, promising him a promotion if he succeeded. Sagara was thrilled by the prospect of promotion, and had a plan to obtain the necessary funds. As it turned out, Nobuna had tasked Sagara with buying up the rice supply in the free trade area to deprive her sister, Nobusumi, of resources for her troops. It was a strategic move to weaken her sister's army without engaging in direct warfare. Meanwhile, Sagara and his team, Toshi and Gaimon, were busy making money and forgot about their mission to purchase rice. On the other hand, Nobuna grew impatient waiting for Sagara to return and complete his task, even though she had given him a week's time. Finally recalling his mission, Sagara instructed Toshi and Gaimon to purchase all the rice in the Owari region. Shortly after, he was apprehended by Nobuna's troops and brought to her. Despite Sagara's explanation that he had delegated the task to his team, Nobuna tortured him for failing to deliver the rice within a week. As the two waited for Toshi and Gaimon to return with the rice, they engaged in conversation in Nobuna's room. Nobuna showed Sagara a globe, revealing her perception that he was ignorant of its purpose. Nobuna was confident in her ability to understand the globe, but Sagara knew better. He was able to show Nobuna where Japan was located, as well as the European countries that the Japanese referred to as barbarians. Sagara emphasized the importance of uniting Japan to prevent attacks from European countries like Portugal and Spain. Their conversation continued into the evening, and as the sun set, Nobuna's patience grew thin. She demanded to see the rice supply, which Sagara had failed to produce. Despite the looming threat of death, Sagara remained calm and unafraid in the face of Nobuna's anger. As the tension mounted, Nobuna asked Sagara if he had any last requests before his execution. Without hesitation, Sagara confidently replied that he had nothing to ask for, knowing that Nobuna was reluctant to carry out the sentence. Despite this, Nobuna prepared to kill Sagara, but was interrupted by the sudden arrival of Gaimon and Toshi, who had brought the rice that Sagara had promised. To Nobuna's surprise, the amount of rice that Sagara had purchased was 4 times what she had requested. As a result, Sagara's life was spared. However, the relief was short-lived, as Nobuna received news that one of her territories was being controlled by her rival, Nobusumi. Gaimon and Toshi revealed that they had been delayed by Nobusumi's soldiers, forcing Nobuna to send her troops to fight directly. In the midst of all this chaos, Sagara approached Nobuna with a request of his own. As Katsu led Nobusumi's troops, it became clear that she was forced to side with Nobusumi due to her position as his advisor. When Nobuna and her forces arrived, they quickly surrounded Nobusumi's outnumbered troops but refrained from attacking, instead calling for Nobusumi to surrender. Sagara added his voice to the call, followed by Katsu and her troops, and the frightened Nobusumi eventually gave up. After being tried by Nobuna, both Katsu and Nobusumi were found guilty, with Nobuna deciding to execute Nobusumi for his rebellion. Despite her warning that any resistance would result in the same fate, Sagara stepped in to delay the execution, knowing that Nobuna didn't truly want to go through with it. He reminded her of the consequences of such a decision in the game they had played, where killing Nobusumi would lead to the loss of many people Nobuna cared about, and her own descent into a violent and uncontrollable state. Persuaded by Sagara, Nobuna abandoned her plans to kill Nobusumi, much to the latter's gratitude. Nobusumi pledged her loyalty to Nobuna and even changed her name, signaling the merger of the Owari region with Nobuna's territory. As night fell, Nobuna and Sagara discussed their plans for the future. Nobuna finally admitted that she believed Sagara was truly from the future. She revealed her ambition to unite Japan and asked for Sagara's help so that he could return home. Sagara agreed, knowing that he needed to help Nobuna in order to have a chance to go back to his own time. Nobuna then made Sagara promise to always remain loyal to her, and he pledged his allegiance by kissing her hand like a knight. Later, we see Dosan and his troops engaged in a battle against Imagawa. However, Jubei appeared and informed Dosan that the attackers were actually his own son and the Mori trio, the three highest generals of the Mori clan. They had betrayed Dosan because they disagreed with his decision to side with Nobuna. As the Owari area became a hotbed for political tension, a new clan known as Azai emerged, raising suspicions about their intentions. Meanwhile, news of the civil war in the Mori clan reached Nobuna and her troops. Despite her desire to assist Dosan, Nobuna weighed the risks and ultimately decided against intervening. Shortly after, Azai Nagamasa approached Nobuna with an unexpected proposal. He offered to form an alliance with the Oda clan against the Imagawa clan and help protect the Mori clan. Initially hesitant, Nobuna began to suspect Nagamasa's true intentions. Her suspicions were confirmed when Nagamasa proposed marriage, leaving Nobuna and her subordinates, including Sagara, shocked. Dosan was taking a break in the forest when his men arrived with terrible news. Most of his troops had defected and joined his own son. In response, he instructed Jubei to head to Owari. As for Nobuna, she was perplexed by Nagamasa's marriage proposal. When she asked if he loved her, Nagamasa admitted that his intentions were purely political, and that he had no romantic feelings for her. He did, however, suggest that love could blossom between them if she were to become his wife. Nagamasa made an unexpected proposal to Nobuna and her subordinate, a political relationship that could help Nobuna achieve her dream of uniting Japan. However, Nobuna rejected the offer outright, insisting that she would only marry someone she loved and who loved her in return. Sagara, one of Nobuna's subordinates, suspected that he might be the one she loved, but Nobuna refused to acknowledge her feelings and even kicked Sagara during their argument. Nobuna and Sagara's fight escalated until Nagahide stepped in to separate them. Despite Nagamasa's offer, Nobuna couldn't decide what to do and asked for time to think. It was a tense situation, and everyone was on edge as they waited for Nobuna's decision. Nobuna's subordinates gathered to discuss her decision regarding the alliance with the Azai clan. They acknowledged that the alliance would strengthen their military power, but they were also worried about Nobuna being used as a political pawn by men. Katsu and the others refused to let Nobuna be seen as a sacrifice. Meanwhile, Sagara had a private conversation with Nobuna and learned that she was determined to help Dosan and protect the people she trusted. Sagara then met with Nagamasa and tried to negotiate an alternative arrangement that didn't involve marriage. However, Nagamasa dismissed Sagara and insulted him, which led Sagara to become angry and nearly attack Nagamasa. Toshi intervened and stopped Sagara, warning him that attacking Nagamasa would be seen as a declaration of war against the Azai clan. The following day, Nagamasa returned to Nobuna with a final offer of marriage. Initially, Nobuna was considering the proposal, but Sagara and the other subordinates strongly opposed the idea. Eventually, Nagamasa retreated and returned to his clan, leaving Nobuna and her allies feeling relieved. Shortly after, Jubei arrived with Dosan's daughter, who brought a letter from her father. In the letter, Dosan expressed his unwillingness to be helped by Nobuna in the upcoming battle, as he wished to maintain his pride as the head of the Mori clan. Nobuna was heartbroken, and although Sagara was determined to help Dosan, Katsu and the others firmly believed that they should respect Dosan's wishes, even if it meant risking his life. Meanwhile, Nobuna was unaware of Sagara's departure and was informed by Katsu. She then ordered her subordinates to prepare troops to aid Sagara and Dosan. Dosan and Sagara were on their way back to Owari when they were ambushed by Dosan's son's troops. The attack claimed the lives of many soldiers and left the duo in a dire situation. Sagara, who had been lost in a video game, was at a loss for ideas. With quick thinking, they were able to evade the attack and reach the border of the Owari region. However, they soon realized that Dosan's son's army was still on their trail and a fight was inevitable. Just when things seemed hopeless, Nobuna and her army appeared on the scene, forcing Dosan's son's troops to retreat. Although Sagara was relieved, his relief was short-lived when Nobuna approached him and slapped him in anger for his reckless actions. The relief was also brief for the group as news spread that Imagawa had invaded Owari with a large army. Despite the urge to fight back against Imagawa, Nobuna realized that her army was outnumbered and chose not to attack. However, Sagara, in a moment of carelessness, made a reckless comment about the situation being exciting as it would reveal Nobuna's true identity when she fought Imagawa. This resulted in Nobuna firing him on the spot and delivering another slap to his face. She emphasized that Sagara's actions were dangerous, and that he had acted without her consent, despite having knowledge of the future. Sagara finally realized his mistake and accepted his dismissal. Nobuna and her army returned to the palace, but she isolated herself from the others. Meanwhile, The war outside the palace raged on, leaving Sagara to silently admit his selfishness. However, Dosan arrived and revealed that Sagara had not been entirely truthful, as he had actually saved him. The two of them then discussed Nobuna's ambition to unite Japan and the game's storyline, where Dosan was supposed to have died. Sagara realized that Nobuna did not want to rely too heavily on his knowledge of the future, as the game's events might not come to pass. Hence, she had fired him. Dosan suggested that Sagara should do whatever he wanted to do for Nobuna, so Sagara decided to invite Toshi and Gaimon to accompany him on a mission to Imagawa's camp at Okehazama. However, upon arrival, Sagara was surprised to find that the terrain was not what he expected and realized that Nobuna would not be able to launch a sudden attack. This caused him to panic and consider giving up, resulting in his army becoming angry and even attacking him. Fortunately, Nobusumi arrived with her army of girls and offered to help Sagara. She also informed him that there was a flat area in the Okehazama region where Imagawa's camp was likely located. Sagara was reinvigorated and eager to continue his mission. Nobuna's subordinates and clan advisors were growing impatient as she remained locked in her room, while Katsu informed her that Sagara had gone somewhere. Eventually, Sagara found the location of Imagawa's campsite, but instead of attacking, he only wanted to scout the area as it was Nobuna and her army who would launch the attack. To delay the attack, Sagara requested that Nobusumi order her army to serve sake to the Imagawa soldiers and get them drunk, buying them some time to report the camp's location to Nobuna. While Imagawa and her clan advisors relaxed, she ordered her ninja, Hanzo, to scout the surrounding area. As Sagara was leaving, they were suddenly ambushed by an army of ninjas. Toshi and Gaimon fought fiercely, allowing Sagara to continue his mission and report to Nobuna. However, Hanzo, the leader of Imagawa's ninja, pursued Sagara and warned him that he wouldn't survive if caught. Despite Hanzo's warning, Sagara kept running until Hanzo threw a shuriken, hitting Sagara's hand. Knowing he couldn't defeat Hanzo, Sagara resorted to revealing events from the future. He told Hanzo that Nobuna would form an alliance with the people from Hanzo's neighborhood to launch a successful attack on Imagawa. Initially skeptical, Hanzo eventually believed Sagara, realizing that he was merely a mercenary ninja and not a loyal follower of Imagawa. Sagara continued to convince Hanzo of Nobuna's eventual victory, and in the end, Hanzo left Sagara, promising to wait and see what would happen in the future. As Nobuna continued to play the piano, Sagara arrived with a wounded hand and urgently reported the location of Imagawa's camp. Nobuna immediately panicked and ordered her army to mobilize. But before they could set off, Nobuna insisted on performing a dance and then wanted to pray, despite not believing in gods. As she uttered those words, the sky darkened and rain poured down, but Nobuna and her army remained resolute. Meanwhile, Imagawa had to cancel her plan to play with Nobusumi's army due to the rain. She was surprised to find her soldiers lying drunk on the ground and had no idea that Nobusumi was actually Nobuna's sister. As Imagawa stood confused and defeated, Nobuna and her army stormed in and attacked. Katsu, ready to finish the job, was stopped by Sagara, who accidentally touched her breasts in the process, leaving her red-faced with embarrassment. However, Sagara quickly redeemed himself by convincing Imagawa to surrender rather than face certain death. Impressed by Sagara's bravery and kindness, Imagawa ultimately gave up. With Nobuna emerging victorious over Imagawa, she was livid with Sagara for his inappropriate gesture towards Katsu. After punishing him, she declared a celebration for their hard-fought victory. As Imagawa officially joined Nobuna's side, she gained two powerful new allies in Matsudaira Motoyasu and Ninja Hattori Hanzo. Hanzo even began to believe Sagara's claims of being a time traveler after witnessing events that coincided with his words. After reclaiming several territories, Nobuna set her sights on the Mino region. Her plan was to take back the region from the clutches of Dosan's rebellious son, Saito Yoshitetsu. However, when Nobuna and her army tried to invade the region, they were met with a dense fog and treacherous rocky traps, all the work of a brilliant strategist named Takenaka Hanbei, who lived in Mino. Nobuna realized that she could not face Hanbei's tactics and decided to try and make her an ally. Sagara offered to go meet with Hanbei, and Nobuna agreed, sending Jubei to accompany him. Sagara and Jubei were on a mission to persuade Takenaka Hanbei to join Nobuna's cause, but they faced unexpected competition from Nagamasa, who was still trying to win Nobuna's hand in marriage. Ando, one of the Mori trio and still loyal to Dosan, escorted them to the meeting. Sagara knew Nagamasa's intentions and realized that Hanbei's support would be crucial in uniting Japan under Nobuna's rule. After a fierce battle of wits with Nagamasa, Sagara managed to win Hanbei over with his sincerity and determination to help Nobuna achieve her goal. Hanbei was moved by Sagara's passion and decided to join forces with Nobuna, giving her a significant advantage in the fight for Unite Japan. Nobuna's plan to win over Takenaka Hanbei worked wonders as the Mino region was conquered without a single drop of blood. This victory, coupled with the Azai clan's surrender, boosted Nobuna's power and influence in Japan. Nagamasa, who was vying for Nobuna's hand in marriage, found himself at a disadvantage when Hanbei joined Nobuna's forces. Despite this setback, Nagamasa still hoped to unite his clan with Nobuna's, and begged her to marry him. Nobuna, however, had other plans and surprised Nagamasa by ordering him to marry her little sister, Nobusumi. To everyone's relief, Nagamasa agreed, and the Oda and Azai alliance was officially formed. Nobuna was on a roll, having gained a new ally in Hanbei and conquered Mino region without bloodshed. Now she set her sights on Kyoto, the capital of the Japanese Empire. The city was weakened after the fall of the shogun government that controlled it, making it easier for Nobuna to achieve her dream of conquering Japan. To do this, she planned to move her government from Owari to Kyoto, but not before conquering several regions along the way, starting with the Rukako area. This was the defense wall of Kyoto city, and she needed to take it before she could proceed. Meanwhile, Nobuna also sent Sagara on a mission to Kyoto to look for a child named Himiko. She wanted to make Himiko an ally because she was the rightful heir of the previous shogun of Kyoto. Sagara embarked on a mission to Kyoto alongside Toshi and Gaimon. Their objective was to locate Himiko, but upon arrival in the city, Sagara had an unexpected encounter with her. Although he didn't realize it, Himiko was right in front of him, incognito. Despite this, the meeting wasn't a total loss, as Sagara's gentle demeanor made Himiko feel at ease and sparked a desire to befriend him. The trio's search for Himiko led them to cross paths with two other girls who were seeking her out for a different purpose. Bantenmaru and Luis Frois, a Portuguese missionary, were in search of Himiko to ask for permission to spread Christianity in Kyoto. The chance encounter brought the group closer together, and Sagara forged a friendship with the two girls. After facing numerous battles, Nobuna's relentless pursuit led her to conquer the Rukako region and arrive in Kyoto. However, her desire to rule the city was met with opposition from Sakihisa Konoe, the previous shogun's advisor and Himiko's assistant. In response, Nobuna appointed Jubei to negotiate with Konoe and obtain his permission for her to take control of the city. To Nobuna's surprise, Konoe's response was to demand a staggering 120,000 gold coins as a condition for allowing her to establish a government in Kyoto. This exorbitant demand was a calculated move by Konoe, who sought to remove Nobuna from the city and seize control for himself using Himiko as a pawn. Jubei reported back to Nobuna about Konoe's outrageous demand for 120,000 gold coins. Realizing she lacked the funds to meet the condition, Jubei suggested monopolizing food merchants in the Sakai region. However, Nobuna refused, deeming it dishonorable. After much consideration, Nobuna decided to visit the Sakai region to ask for a loan from her wealthy acquaintance, Sokyu Ime. Accompanied by Jubei and Sagara, they sought Ime's assistance but were disappointed to learn that he too couldn't provide the necessary funds. In a bid to cheer up Nobuna, Ime directed them to the wealthiest man in Sakai, Sokyu Suda. Ime finally introduced Nobuna to Suda, who refused to help Nobuna without compensation. After some negotiation, Suda agreed to hold a food contest between Jubei and Sagara, with the winner receiving the same amount of gold coins as Konoe's demand. Suda intentionally appointed Jubei as a contestant due to her connection to Tsuba. To make things more interesting, Tsuba proposed a bet that if Jubei won, Ame would hand over half of his assets in the Sakai region to Tsuba. Although Nobuna and Ame agreed, they secretly hoped that Jubei would lose the contest. However, Jubei refused to lose to Sagara, whom she believed always outsmarted her in every event, despite her clan's expertise in strategy. Sagara, on the other hand, relied solely on his memory. The following day marked the start of the highly anticipated cooking contest. Sagara's initial attempt at impressing the judges with his takoyaki smothered in creamy mayonnaise sauce worked wonders, winning the admiration of Tsuba and others. However, Jubei was determined to defeat Sagara and took the competition seriously. Despite Sagara's food being better, Jubei was declared the winner, leaving Sagara feeling defeated. Ime was left with no choice but to part with half of his wealth, much to his dismay. Nobuna, on the other hand, was greatly disappointed in Jubei's behavior and kept her distance from her. After walking in the rain, Jubei realized the error of his ways and that his ego had come before his friendships. He was filled with regret and eventually decided to apologize to Nobuna. Fortunately, Nobuna was quick to forgive Jubei and even entrusted him with the important task of guarding Kyoto while she set off to rescue Sagara. According to reports, Sagara had been taken captive by the three Miyoshi, who were working under the command of Konoe. However, before Nobuna could return, the city was attacked by Konoe's other subordinate, Hisahide Matsunaga. Jubei valiantly fought against Matsunaga and his army, but was ultimately overpowered as they closed in and set fire to his surroundings. Despite being overwhelmed by Matsunaga's magical abilities, Jubei refused to back down and fiercely battled against him. But just as Jubei was about to succumb, Nobuna arrived on the scene, along with her subordinate and the recently rescued Sagara. With the help of Hanbei, another expert in magic, Sagara quickly moved to assist Jubei. Thanks to their combined efforts, Jubei managed to survive the dire situation. But Matsunaga remained convinced that her army could not be defeated, and she continued to stand her ground. Unexpectedly, Froys and Ban Tenmaru appeared with their followers and pledged their assistance to Nobuna's cause. This caught Matsunaga off guard, as she never anticipated that Christians would come to Nobuna's aid. She soon realized the extent of Nobuna's leadership and charisma, causing her to surrender and join Nobuna's growing band of allies. A few days later, Nobuna decided to use the prize money from Jubei's contest win to fulfill Konoe's requirements. With her leadership skills and determination, she successfully established a government in Kyoto. In a stroke of luck, Nobuna also managed to meet Himiko, who entrusted her government to Nobuna thanks to her previous encounter with Sagara. With the government established, Nobuna set her sights on conquering other parts of Japan. Meanwhile, Sagara and Jubei put their differences aside and became good friends after their previous battles. Jubei even developed feelings for Sagara after he showed kindness towards her, despite her previous disappointments. Sometime later, Nobuna was in a perilous situation while trying to conquer a territory, as she was surrounded by Konoe and his alliance, who were still trying to get rid of her despite receiving payment. To ensure Nobuna's safety, Sagara made the brave decision to hold off Konoe's army and allow Nobuna and her army to escape. Despite Nobuna's initial rejection due to the danger of Sagara's plan, she eventually had no other choice but to accept it. In return, Sagara promised Nobuna that he would survive and return to her. Thanks to Sagara's decision, Nobuna and her army survived the siege of Konoe's army. However, not all of Nobuna's army was on her side. Hanzo and Hanbei, along with Toshi and Jubei, decided to help Sagara face Konoe's army. When they arrived, they saw Sagara being hit by a bomb thrown by Hanzo. Jubei's anger got the better of her, and she charged blindly towards the enemy, only to be hit by cannon fire and thrown into a ravine. Sadly, Sagara and Jubei were reported dead, leaving their allies devastated. Even though Sagara was from the future and could predict events, no one expected his death. Nobuna was the most devastated by the news of Sagara's death. In a fit of rage, she decided to counterattack Konoe and his alliance, seeking vengeance for Sagara. Despite the loss of Sagara, there was a glimmer of hope as Jubei survived the incident. She discovered that the bomb Hanzo threw was just a ploy to halt Konoe's army's attack. Furthermore, Jubei found Sagara, who had also survived. However, Jubei couldn't return Sagara to Nobuna and the others immediately because she needed to tend to his injuries first. Nobuna's rage was unstoppable, and she quickly defeated Konoe and his alliance. However, even with her victory, she couldn't shake the feeling of sadness as she mourned Sagara's loss. Then, out of nowhere, Sagara appeared before her. At first, Nobuna thought it was a dream. However, Sagara reassured her that he was alive and had been tended to by Jubei. Overjoyed, Nobuna embraced Sagara tightly, tears streaming down her face. Sagara returned her embrace, happy to be reunited with her. From that moment on, Sagara and Nobuna were reunited and their bond grew stronger. Sagara finally understood the depth of Nobuna's feelings for him. The anime concludes with their triumphant return to Kyoto, where they were hailed as heroes. Sagara realized that he couldn't return to his own world just yet because Nobuna's quest to unify Japan was far from over. The moral of the story is to always consider the consequences of our actions before we act.